Reschenthaler. Mr. Raskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But Ms. Chu, thank you for bringing this to us, and I want to make sure I've got this right. This legislation will apply only to presidents going forward. It doesn't apply to former presidents, does it?
That is correct.
Okay. And so Donald Trump, he was able to get away with not having his tax returns released while he was president. He already was able to make that happen. So this is about saying, going forward, we want to make sure that those presidential returns are available for the public to see, right?
Right.
Okay. Now, I want to go back to something I think that the ranking member said about, well, why would this apply just to the president, not to the Speaker of the House, not to the Senate Majority Leader, and so on, which is a fair question, and I want to try to tease this out, because I would think the president is in a unique posture. The president sits on top of the entire executive branch of government, including the Department of Treasury, which includes the Internal Revenue Service. And according to at least one theory, which is very popular, certainly in conservative circles, there is a unitary executive, meaning everybody in the executive branch reports all the way up to the president. And the president decides everything that goes on and is responsible for everything that goes on below him or below her. In that case, that means that the Internal Revenue Service is vertically obedient and responsive to the President of the United States. Have there not been presidents, like Richard Nixon is one who comes to mind immediately, who have used their power over the Treasury Department and the IRS in order to persecute political enemies, people on their enemies list, to say, we're going to audit your returns, we're going to go after you? Isn't that part of the history of the presidency?
Yes.
Okay, so this legislation is saying that the president himself or herself, who has this power over the whole executive branch of government, must be subject to it as the person who ultimately has to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. Now, I would add something else. Under Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8 of the Constitution, the president is restricted, like other federal office holders is, in not being able to take presents, offices, emoluments, and titles from foreign governments. Isn't that right? And this is a president the last president was one who started off in office by saying he was not going to stop being in business. He was going to continue being in more than 200 different businesses he has all over the world. Hotels, golf courses, licensing deals, you name it. Okay, don't the people of the United States who employ all of us, don't the people of the United States have an interest in making sure that the President of the United States is not violating the Foreign Emoluments Clause or the Domestic Emoluments Clause, for that matter, by engaging in business and receiving income from foreign government sources, or as the Constitution puts it, princes, kings, foreign states, without the consent of Congress? Don't we have that interest? Well, this strikes me as an obvious thing to do, as the right thing to do. I'm sorry it had to come to Congress legislating in order to make it happen, because presidents up until this point had respected the tradition of just opening up their tax returns, but certainly it's the right thing to do. And it seems to me odd that in a fit of pique about whatever imagined transgressions poor Donald Trump has suffered, we would frustrate ourselves going forward in terms of defining the law in such a way that makes sense within our constitutional system. I want to thank you and all the members of the Ways and Means Committee for the work you've done on it. Yeah, Mr. Smith, please.
May I suggest that the IRS has immense power to audit and to draw conclusions from audits and refer to the DOJ if necessary. I mean,
does the IRS have the power to audit the president if the president says, don't audit me?
the IRS still has the power to audit.
Really, even if the president says no? Because isn't the whole theory of the unitary executive that the president controls all executive department functions underneath him?
Well, the IRS commissioner serves in a different time frame and so forth.
So you understand you're breaking from conservative orthodoxy there, which says that the president is ultimately in control of everything that happens in the executive branch.
Well, there is a process that that has traditionally been taking place that I think we want to take a look at. And again, we could come up together with a process that I think would be far more responsible than jamming this through a last minute, all because of one taxpayer who was president.
Do you have a substantive problem with this legislation? Because I haven't really heard a substantive criticism.
There are concerns about the language and the very fact that it hasn't been vetted, because yesterday's markup was really more about a release of private information than anything.
Well, here, I think Mr. Perlmutter may have conceded too much when he said you had a fair point about why not raise the legislation in advance. They couldn't write the legislation in advance because they didn't know whether or not the current process was working. It wasn't until this was finally released after all the adjudication that they learned, as I understand, that the IRS was not conducting the presidential audits that they were supposed to do under the handbook. Is that right, Ms. Chu?
That is absolutely correct.
You didn't know that before.
Right.
I mean, for all you knew, the system was working perfectly and there was no problem, but they didn't know that until they conducted all the adjudication. So it seems to me that, in fact, you have very little problem with the substance of the legislation, but everybody, again, is still scrambling around to show the former president that nobody is going to step on his toes in any way. And I think that that's, an unfortunate thing, but we may just have to disagree about that. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.